the bios of our speakers so that you know that we're bringing really well experienced people to speak to you today. So our first speaker is Jimmy, or Faye Jimmy, but he also goes by Jimmy. So Jimmy is a technical writer and software engineer, and he works at the intersection of technical writing and DevOps. He has helped organizations improve documentation processes, streamline workflows, and make technical content more accessible to engineers and end users alike. He also goes by Erin. So yeah. So Jimmy is also passionate about bridging the gap between DevOps and documentation and showing how good documentation can be just as important as your code. So welcome, Jimmy. It's a pleasure to have you here. So I'll be moving on to the bio of the next speaker. His name is Emmanuel. So Emmanuel leads the DevSecOps team at Datamelon, where he focuses on building secure and scalable cloud infrastructure. He has a strong background in automation and collaboration, designing systems that are both resilient and efficient. Emmanuel is committed to ensuring that platforms run smoothly and securely while helping teams adopt the best processes that protect the integrity of their processes. Welcome, Emmanuel. It's a pleasure having you here as well. To not waste, our time, we're just going to kickstart everything. And I feel like I've given a bio of the both of them, but they might have a thing or two to say. So I feel like we can get started by getting to know the both of you. So maybe Jimmy can go first and then Emmanuel. So Jimmy, can you also briefly introduce yourself and maybe share how you got into the technical writing space?
Yeah, thank you so much. Yeah, I think most people here, I think most people here, they already know me. We'll spend 2 weeks together. But for people that we didn't take the session together, my name is Jimmy, and I'm a technical writer and also a software engineer. Well, I'm passionate about building scalable and resilient software applications. And aside from building scalable and resilient software applications, I also love documenting the process. I also love taking people through the process of figuring out issues through technical documentations. So in a nutshell, that's just about me. And yeah, thank you.
Okay, thank you. Okay, well, maybe we can get into that sometime later, but I think I also asked how you got into the technical writing space. You want to like shed a bit of light on that, or maybe even as the session goes on?
Don't worry, I'll keep talking about that as the session goes on, yeah. But I'll talk about my experience. I think is quite important how people would understand how I got into the intersection of technical writing and as well the software engineering space, the DevOps space. So I'm going to share more light in that.
We look forward to learning about that. Okay, I think we'll move on to Emmanuel now. Can you also briefly introduce yourself and share how you got into your field?
Hi, good evening. Thank you for the introduction, the earlier introduction to about. My name is Emmanuel Sonny. I am the DevSecOps team lead at Datamelon. Like you mentioned in my bio, I am very passionate about automation and collaboration. So I help our customers, I help clients, I help financial institutions, government agencies, startups, SMEs, you name it. I help them build their infrastructure, streamline that deployment process, make sure they're following best practices, and I also ensure the integrity of these systems. So ensuring that their infrastructure, their systems, their applications are running smoothly, taking appropriate load, is scaling automatically. That's my bread and butter. That's what I am passionate about. As to how I got into the field, I actually stumbled into DevOps. That's how I'm going to put it, because I initially started as a backend developer. And so I think that kind of familiarized me with the pain points of developers when it comes to deploying applications and ensuring that it's actually running smoothly. So I would say how I actually stumbled into it was at Datamelon. Actually, like I said, I started as a backend developer. So there was a project that just came in, and at the time they were still recruiting and they needed extra hands on a particular project. And this was very top, like it was very, very urgent. So our CTO just decided to for some reason, just decided to hand it over to me. So I was working hand in hand with him, and because I'm actually a graduate of computer science, so some basic concepts of DevOps when it comes to networking, mostly networking, to be honest, because that was what most of it was about. So that kind of synced with me. I was able to grasp it very, very easily, and we were able to like go through this infrastructure setup for this company and deploy it in time. Though I mean, the process was very, very grueling because it was a whole new field for me. So now learning process, the implementation, seeing what I worked on, seeing the traffic it was able to receive and be stable at the same time, seeing the impacts that my work made. That was kind of what made me very, very interested in the concept of DevOps. And from there, it has just been a very, 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 very interesting ride so far. Yeah, so
Wow.
that's that about me.
Yeah, thank you so much for that. It was really nice learning about you. And to the point you made about, seeing your products working very well and helping to scale their processes and everything. I feel like there's this joy that comes with seeing your products work very well. Yes, like I'm glad that you had that experience and you're now in the DevOps space. Okay, so I think I'm going to move on to the next question, and this one is actually directed to Jimmy. So, for someone interested in both fields, how would you suggest that you balance technical depth with writing clarity?
Okay. For someone like me, yeah, that's I'm in the intersection of both technical writing and DevOps. I see it as like you're wearing two hats at the same time. So on
Mhm.
one side, you need to understand the technical concepts enough to explain correctly to anyone in clear terms that they can pick up easily and as well make good use of it. But on the other hand, you should know how to take away the technical jargons and communicate in a way that anyone on the team can use. So my approach is simple. The way I balance technical depth with writing clarity is quite simple. Once I Whenever I learn something new, let's say I learn a particular topic, I would write about it, or I would talk about it like I would explain to someone else. So when I'm learning it, I try to go it over in my head. So, okay, can I break it down to simple terms that even a newbie or a beginner can pick it up and as well understand that particular topic with little or no issue. So once I'm confident that I can understand it, then I focus on telling the story of why it matters. So when I pick up a new topic, I just don't like go straight into the writing aspect. I try to break it down into simple terms because that's what technical writing is all about, is breaking terms into simple, clear language that anybody can use and understand. So that's the way I find the balance. I try to understand the technical side, that's learning the technical side, and I try to translate it into simple terms that anyone could actually pick up, understand, and have no issues with it. So this way, I don't lose my clarity, and I make sure that the technical depth is intact as well. I think you're muted, though.
Oh, thank you. Sorry. I was saying that it's actually a very good approach, and it ensures that anyone who comes across your documents, would make sure to leave with enough value from the document or technical content. Thank you so much for that tip. Okay, my next question is actually directed to both speakers. So maybe Emmanuel can speak first. So the question is, what tools should aspiring DevOps engineers or technical writers learn to stay relevant?
Okay. So let me start with the tools for DevOps engineers. So as for the tools, I would actually advise to more or less focus on concepts because the tools are a lot. Because if you want to look at where the environment you're going to deploy your applications to, or where you're going to deploy infrastructure to, there are different providers for that. There's DigitalOcean, there's AWS, there's Azure. But one thing that's common in all of them, the concepts in which all of them are based on are the same. So I would really advise, in as much as the tools are important, I would advise to also learn the concepts. So in concept, in terms of you probably want to learn most, especially about DNS, how the internet works. You want to learn stuff regarding Linux, because as a DevOps engineer, you are definitely going to make interaction with the command line, Linux command line, and maybe peradventure you end up somewhere that they use that in the Microsoft or Windows ecosystem, probably PowerShell.
Um, I don't know if it's just me.
Yeah,
Yeah,
Nigeria.
okay.
Okay. I can pick it
Okay,
from
so
there.
Starters, you pick one.
okay,
Like I
okay.
mentioned, the content is the same. So the service, the names of the service may be different. You know what? All of them are just object stores. You know, this is the name, but the underlying mechanism behind all of them are usually the same. So I would say you should pick one hyperscaler and try and learn the core services that this hyperscaler offers. And
Yeah.
the most popular actually is usually AWS, and there are pathways to learn very, very easily. Also, infrastructure as code, that is very, very important for a DevOps engineer. Infrastructure as code. Terraform is most likely like the internet, sorry, I say internet, pardon me, the industry standard. But also there are some places that may use AWS CloudFormation or CDK. I'm very heavy on AWS, so I actually have an idea about CDK and CloudFormation. But Terraform is cloud agnostic. You can use it with Kubernetes, you can use it with DigitalOcean, with GitHub, whatever cloud provider. Basically, they have modules for that. And yeah, you need to also familiarize yourself with the concept of CI/CD, continuous integration, continuous deployment. How can you create pipelines, and maybe the tools you can use to create pipelines? And you can start with GitHub Actions. I'm sure that's like the most. That's probably like the easiest to access, because I'm sure everybody has like a GitHub account. You can go with GitLab CI. Again, if you're running an AWS shop like I am, you can use code pipeline and code build. Just familiarize yourself with the concepts of CI/CD pipeline, how you can streamline the deployment process for developers. And for technical writers, as much as the previous concepts that I also explained still stand, but I think the most important one is Git and Markdown, actually, because for documentation, I mean, immediately I enter a repository, the first thing I'm most likely going to see is a readme.md, and that Markdown, the structure, like just that's like the first impression you're going to have about a repository. So that matters a lot, I'm sure, in terms of technical writing. And just familiarize yourself with the basics so that you really understand what's going on from a DevOps engineer's perspective. You're not just writing for the sake of writing. You understand what is being done and how things are structured. Yeah, so that's my 2 cents
I feel like
regarding that.
you're Thank you so much for not holding back and for giving us as much detail as we could need, regarding our first steps, tools to learn, and everything. So you said Terraform, CI/CD for the DevOps space, also learning about concepts from moving on to tools like Azure, DigitalOcean, AWS, and in the technical writing space, you mentioned Git and Markdown. So I'm just like reiterating in case anybody missed that. Well, I think this question is also directed to Jimmy as well. So, do you have anything to add regarding the tools DevOps engineers or aspiring technical writers should learn to stay relevant?
Yeah, for me, yeah. So as a technical writer in the DevOps space, I would say, yeah, you need Git and Markdown because they are essential halves. They are things that you need right now. I think also you also need documentation, API documentation tools, like Swagger or Postman. Because right now, most of 100% of the code already on the, like, you need version control. So there is no way you're not going to make use of Git and Markdown tools as a technical writer, because teams right now are making use of GitHub, and you have to know version control. So at the end of the day, it's not there are a lot of shining tools when it comes to DevOps and also technical writing in DevOps. But I just think you should pick the ones that would help you work better as with the DevOps engineers, and that would allow you to deliver documentation that's accurate and useful. So at the end of the day, as a technical writer, the tools you should also look at when you're in the DevOps space is you need your Gits, you need your Markdown. Just as Emmanuel has said, the first thing you get to see when you go to your repository is a README file. So that structure is really important and it's in Markdown format. So, and then your API documentation tools like Swagger or Postman. So as a technical writer, if you know all these tools, then you're on the right pedestal.
Thank you so much. So to reiterate, our speakers mentioned that if you are an aspiring DevOps engineer, aspiring technical writer, the tools you need to learn, you need to ensure that with those tools, you're able to work with your team very efficiently. And, they both mentioned that you need to know version control, which, requires Git as well. Also need to learn Markdown. And they also emphasize on the fact that you need to know the concepts very well so that you can actually move on to using the tools very efficiently as well. So thank you so much for your responses to that question. And I think we're going to move on to a different section. So there are a lot of myths and misconceptions regarding these two fields. And you're both experts, and I feel like you have enough experience to help us shed light on some of these misconceptions. So I think I'm going to direct the question in this regard to Emmanuel. So the question I have for you is, what is the biggest myth you've heard about DevOps that you would like to clear up for people who are listening?
Okay. So in regards to the biggest myths, I would say that seeing DevOps as just a role or a position, in the sense that it's more of a culture, more of a concept. So something as simple as creating your own branch and pushing that branch before you merge into a master branch or the main branch. They call that GitOps. So that's GitOps is actually a principle of DevOps. So it's more of a culture, and DevOps engineers, in sense, we are more like bridging the gap between development and operations. So even though, I mean, my title is that I'm a DevOps engineer, I'm still meant to be able to imbibe best practices in regards to DevOps to my front-end developers, back-end developers, database administrators. That's why when you say DevOps engineer, you're most likely going to see that individual as a bit of knowledge when it comes to different technologies, because they are like bridging the gap between these various components and just like telling each of these individuals, each of these departments, each of these components, the best things to do, the best path to follow in order to go for a scalable and robust system. So yeah, I think that's basically it. Actually, it's not just a rule. Is a concept, like I said, and I'm pretty sure it's one that almost everybody actually already follows.
Mhm. Thank you so much for helping us clear that up. I feel like my knowledge about DevOps is quite limited. So hearing you shed light on that and just like explain what it actually entails has just helped to broaden my perspective. So thank you for that. Okay. So we've cleared a very big DevOps need. So we are going to move on to how you can actually transition into DevOps. So if someone in the audience wants to get into the DevOps space, how would you reckon that they start?
Okay. So pretty much what I mentioned earlier, you begin with the basics, with the concepts, because you can't say you want to learn Kubernetes or from the scratch and you don't know the basics of how the Linux kernel works, or you don't understand networking as a whole. So you definitely have to learn the basics. And like I mentioned before, some of the basics, Linux, familiarize yourself with the command line, basic networking, like maybe just know about virtual private clouds, routers, route tables, switches, how they correspond, like how cloud environments can correspond with an on-premise environment. Networking is actually very, 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 very important. I think people tend to underrate that when it comes to DevOps. Yeah, so that containers, like the software world is moving very, very rapidly, and one of the things that are being pushed by all these hyperscalers, and literally every major organization in the cloud space is containers. So Docker is going to be, I mean, like I said, you can't just say you want to learn Kubernetes and you don't know networking. Docker is actually the main thing running Kubernetes. Containers, container orchestration. Different providers have their own orchestrating services. For Amazon, there's ECS. There's also Google App Engine for GCP. So like I mentioned earlier, maybe while you're learning containers and container orchestration, when it's time to move on to, you want to like deploy online and deploy onto an hyperscaler, pick an hyperscaler, choose the container service. If you want to, if you like challenges and you preferably want to go to Kubernetes, you can run with GKE or EKS or whatever. Yeah, that's it. Containers, the command line, infrastructure as code. Again, like I mentioned, infrastructure as code is very important. You do not want to be doing ClickUps. Infrastructure as code is very important. So Terraform, and it's very, very easy to learn, and it's declarative programming. So I'm pretty sure learning it is not going to be a very big issue. And yeah, those are actually the basics. And once you have that, I think the next thing, nothing is going to beat doing. So there are projects you can do online. You follow the Cloud Resume Challenge. There are roadmaps, DevOps.sh. They have beginner to advanced projects that you can do that is really, really, really going to broaden your knowledge. Even I, from time to time, I go to roadmap.sh to do some projects in my free time. So those are really, really going to be helpful if you're looking to transition into the DevOps.
Very much. So if there's anyone here who is curious about DevOps, who has been wondering, okay, how exactly do I start DevOps? What is DevOps about? I feel like our speaker, has done a good job breaking down some of the misconceptions, helping you have a better idea of what DevOps is, because he did the same for me. And if you want to start, like he said, have to start with the basics, learn the concepts, learn how to use the Linux command line, infrastructure as code, container orchestration, and every other thing that he said. So thank you so much for sharing that. I'm actually going to move on to Jimmy this time. So my question for you is, for the people who are interested in combining DevOps and technical writing, what practical steps do you feel like they can take to carve a niche for themselves in their space?
Yeah. So for me, when I was trying to combine the two, the best way is to always start small. Whenever you're trying to start anything new, start small and be practical about it. You could write like a documentation for a DevOps related project. I mean, maybe like a simple CI/CD pipeline for a Dockerized app. You could just write a tutorial about it. Just share it publicly. Maybe you could share it as a blog on Ashnode, on dev.co, on your Medium. You're already showing your technical skills and your ability to explain. So once you learn like a new concept or a topic, like for those in the bootcamp session, like the assignment one I gave you, that's like a perfect place for you to like start sharing about your knowledge in the DevOps space. So because you are showing your technical skills, because you had to go make research about that particular topic, and you are putting it out for those that do not understand that particular concept. That is you starting small and you being practical. So you are showing your technical skills and your ability to also explain. So another thing that is really good, and is not just with DevOps alone, but it's across all industries, is contributing to open source projects. Because when you contribute to open source projects, it adds to your portfolio. Because you would see how documents and DevOps processes, they work hand in hand in real world. So you are getting that real world experience when you contribute to open source projects. And over time, you just find yourself naturally as someone that loves explaining DevOps concept and love speaking of DevOps. And before you know, you're already the bridge between the both worlds. So that is how I started. And I think that's like a practical tip for anyone that wants to be that bridge, that link between technical writing and DevOps.
And I love the word that you used there, bridge, because honestly, it's actually a bridge. You learn the technical side of things, and then you ensure that other people coming into this space don't run into issues that you faced. and they have, a better experience in space as well. So having that role as a technical writer helps to, achieve that, and you just play your own part in giving back to the community. Okay, so we're going to take a different route at the moment, and we're just going to help our listeners just get a sense of how your everyday looks like. So I'm going to move back to Emmanuel. So from your perspective, what role does documentation play in your day-to-day workflow as a DevOps
It's very, 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 very important. Very, very
engineer?
important. So something as simple as writing the description of my variables in my Terraform code. That kind of documentation is very, very important. And I work with infrastructure that is heavily regulated and under, they have to be very, very compliant. So for audit purposes, if there's a single, maybe something as an incident, we need incident response documents, change management processes. So these are documents that are going to be sent to auditing bodies, probably like central bank or NITA or something. So documentation is very, very, very important, especially when it comes to infrastructure. Is things that systems do not play with documentation of infrastructure. So yeah, it's a very, very important, very, very
Yeah.
important in my day. Yes.
Yeah, I think I have a follow-up question to that because from your response, I feel like we can tell that documentation is very helpful and it plays a big role in your day-to-day tasks. So the follow-up question I have is, how does poor or missing documentation affect your work or team performance?
So one thing I pride myself and my team in is our speed and stability, and that's thanks to proper documentation. Like we can spin up infra for almost any scenario, almost any use case in minutes because we've definitely done something like that before. So there are templates, there's documentation to follow. So poor documentation, it has affects our speed. It really, really affects our speed because we are almost like trying to figure out how things are going to work. We're piecing new information together, or maybe we're like inheriting maybe a legacy system or an infrastructure that has been built by someone else. So we are now trying to create the architecture on our own, see how these pieces are linked, what is linking this to this, why did they implement this way, why was this implemented that way, why wasn't it this way? Those questions, those silly bits that can like that just slow things down in general, and anything that can cause a single point of failure, that's those are actually the results of poor documentation. So like I mentioned, documentation is really, really, really important. Yes, speed, it really, really affects our speed and stability of the infrastructure that we're going to provision.
So much for that response. And I feel like your response has also shed more light on, the importance of technical writers and writing clearly and writing in a way that, people will understand, which ties back to Jimmy's earlier point of, optimizing for clarity in as much as you're optimizing for technical depth. So he mentioned, legacy code or working with, like projects, and they require the documentation to be able to help them at certain steps. So if the documentation, is written in a way that, has a lot of technical jargon, it's not really easy to understand, it also adds up to this, the speed, the fact, like how do I phrase this now? Not working as quickly as they want to. So yeah, I feel like my point there is, to just shed light on the fact that technical writing is also important. Writing good documentation is also important, which is something that Jimmy mentioned that he strives towards as well. So thank you for your response. We're going to move on to collaboration and communication. Collaboration is key. For most products, most systems, you almost always have to work with someone else to bring it to life. So I have a question for both of our speakers, and I think Jimmy can answer this first. So the question I have is, how can technical writers and DevOps engineers work better together?
Okay. Like I mentioned earlier, I said we are the bridge. Technical writers are the bridge between the DevOps engineer and the end users. So I believe when we see documentation as part of the workflow. Like it should not even be an afterthought. It should be something that's during the iteration or the ideation phase of a particular project. The team is already thinking about how they are going to document these processes and workflow. So technical writers needs to be involved from the early stages. So even when the engineers are still designing that system, technical writers needs to be at that early stage, because that way they can understand the context and they can understand the right question before things will start getting complex. But on the other side, engineers can also, DevOps engineers, we can also make life easier by giving technical writers access to these tools, the code, maybe the test environment they can use as well. Let them just play around with it. Because a good technical writer is one that can source for information. You need that information gathering. And the only way you can get that information gathering is if the engineers, they would give you that test environment to go play with, that sandbox environment to go and make your findings that you go and play with. So once you as a technical writer, you need to be involved from the early stages, and engineers as well, they are playing their role by involving you, by explaining all this concept at the early stage. So when both sides they collaborate, when we collaborate like this, then documentation will stop being like a nice to have. Documentation is never a nice to have, it's an integral part of the product success. So technical writers needs to get involved from the beginning. DevOps engineers needs to give technical writers, needs to give us, sorry, that's the right pronoun. So I'm trying to find the balance between the two words. Needs to give us the tools and the sandbox environment to go play with, so that by the time the documentation part is done, everything is not just an afterthought, it's not just a nice to have, it's part of it's going to roll out to the product as well. So I think that's my point of view on how both sides of the coin can work together to perform better.
Yeah, documentation is actually very integral. And someone also dropped something in the chat to buttress that point. I think it was Samuel. He said documentation is the product. And from Emmanuel's earlier response, he works with documentation to solve certain issues at work. Jimmy's emphasis on the fact that documentation is an integral part of the success of the product as well shows how important it is to have documentation that actually helps your end user. So I think Emmanuel can also answer this question so we can hear his take on things. And the question was, how can technical writers and DevOps engineers work better together?
Yeah, so I think Jimmy has mostly said my mind. Context is very, very important. So it's very important to embed the writer in the process while the project is going on, probably from the ideation phase. So it's not like after the project is over, you just dump the task on them to like give documentation on what has been implemented. That won't give a proper output. And like he also mentioned, I think giving them access, maybe even if it's, let's say, probably on your console, so they can see how things are actually working together. Something as simple as an architecture diagram, that anything that will basically add more context to the system, so they actually know exactly what they are writing about. And from the engineer's perspective, I would say patience is also very, very important, because the dumb question that a writer may have is what we actually give a new perspective. That's coming from the end user's perspective. So whoever is going to be using that documentation, what the writer is asking, I'm sure is going to offer a new perspective. So it's in that regard, there's no such thing as a dumb question. It's something that you would want to answer. So yeah, patience from the side of the engineers. Maybe that's the only new thing I'm going to add. So yeah, that's how I believe we can work hand in
Yeah,
hand with writers.
thank you. So having patience, answering their questions, and bringing them on board as early as possible are the keys to collaborating successfully between technical writers and DevOps engineers. So I feel like we want to have more we want, people to be able to have like a practical sort of relationship with what we're discussing. So, we want to get stories from our speakers. And okay, I think it's more Emmanuel actually. So, I want to ask Emmanuel, can you share an example from your day-to-day role or your work where the documentation came in to help you solve a major issue and where the lack of it caused a sort of issue, or maybe I don't know, yeah, maybe caused a major issue.
Okay. So in terms of, I would say how the lack of it, let me start with the bad one first. How the lack of it. So there was a time when there was a major outage for a financial institution. I'm sure it may have affected one or two people here. So the previous deployment process, the one that they were using, the deployment process that they had before was not properly documented. So their systems went out. And this was on like, it was a Sunday morning. And I mean, everybody was everybody was just called. We were put on a call to try and troubleshoot what was going
Wow.
on. So like first, I knew that we were able to just narrow it down to okay, they started the deployment and something went wrong there. But because this was something we're not very knowledgeable about and there wasn't documentation about it, that slowed down the whole troubleshooting process. And I mean, since it was on a Sunday morning and people were in church, like the CFO, the
Yeah.
business person was already shouting and saying stuff like, hey, because I mean, transactions were not going to go through when it was time for offering and all of that. So there was that whole, like I mentioned earlier, we had to start putting things together again. And it was not something that we implemented. It was a whole new process for us. So we had to
Yeah.
just tough it out. Something that could have taken, I'm sure, probably about 30 minutes or so to debug and resolve. It took, I think we started in the morning, we could not finish until mid-afternoon, probably around 3 or so. So that just, like I mentioned, it affected the speed. So that was, and to mitigate that problem, we then had to like create a new process for them, document this process, and send it for review, the incident change response, change management process, and all of that. We had to use documentation to then mitigate what the lack of documentation already caused. So in terms of how documentation helps, is pretty much just the same like I've been mentioning, because we already have boilerplates templates, and under it for every new engineer, the fact that I can probably not be available and my team members can set up a whole new infrastructure for a new client or edit or modify existing infrastructure for a new client, because what they are going to do is already lined up. Our knowledge base is there. So the fact that they can all do that without needing my attention, probably maybe just for a
Yeah.
PR or something, but like that they can make these changes without my attention. That's one way that we use documentation quite for my day to day. Yes.
The story that you shared, wow, that was. I'm just trying to imagine the amount of pressure or brain power, the exertion that you guys faced on that day, and it's something that if you just had the information stored somewhere, like you said, you'd have been able to fix it in 30 minutes. That's actually crazy, and it just goes on to show shed more light actually, because you guys have already emphasized the importance of documentation. I feel like that story emphasizes it even more. So thank you for sharing that. And I have one more question for you in this regard. And the question that I have is, have you ever had to write documentation yourself? And if yes, did that shape your experience or your view of technical writers?
Yeah. I write documentations myself. For incident reports especially, and maybe when there's a new process that we are trying to implement. So for other engineers to have a grasp of it, I'm usually the one that writes documentation in that regard, and also for developers. And yeah, I respect writers because it's not easy. So like when it comes to technical jargon, okay, yes, that's my bit. But then breaking it down into concepts that probably a layman is able to understand. And like, because I'm not looking at things from an engineer's perspective. I'm looking at things from, sorry, not from a DevOps engineer's perspective, probably from a developer's perspective. So there's a lot of things I need to break down. So there's a lot of respect I have in that regard for professional writers. I'd rather just like explain it to someone than like sit down and try to break it down into terms that a normal not normal person, but like someone that doesn't have the same skill set as I do will
Yeah.
understand. So yeah, it's it's a very, 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 let me not say difficult, but it's something I rate. I rate the skill like a lot.
Well, thank you for that. What would you rate it on a scale of what?
In terms of difficulty or how much I just
Yeah,
rate it,
in terms of like, yeah, relevance basically or
10,
importance, I
10,
guess.
10, 10, 10.
Thank you for thank you for responding to that. We're basically wrapping things up at this point. So I guess we just want to get a bit of advice from both our speakers. For people, for technical writers looking to grow in the DevOps heavy space. This first question is going to go to Jimmy. Yes, you can ask questions. We'll get to that at the end. We're almost wrapping up. So I'm going to ask Jimmy the first question. So this question is for technical writers looking to enter DevOps heavy environments, what should they learn first? Should it be tools like the first tool that they should learn? So should it be like Git? Should it be the basics of CI/CD? Should it be scripting? Should it be containers? What do you feel like it should be?
Okay. First thing I would say is don't try to learn everything at once. Just like Emmanuel mentioned here, DevOps is all about the concepts. DevOps is a very broad field. So instead of you trying to learn everything at once, why don't you just start with the basics that's going to help you collaborate with engineers? Because as a technical writer in the DevOps space, you're going to be collaborating with DevOps engineers a lot. So you need to actually understand the systems that you're documenting. So first off, I would say version control with Git and GitHub. This is non-negotiable, yeah, because most DevOps teams these days, the code and documentation is always in the GitHub. So knowing how to clone a repo, create branches, you push changes instantly is really important. So version control. Then you need to know CI/CD concepts. So I'm not saying you should know how to build a pipeline from scratch or no, but at least you should understand the concepts behind continuous integration and continuous delivery. Know you understand what it means, how the code gets tested, how it's built, and how it's deployed automatically. This is going to like help you when you're writing your pipeline instructions. It's going to help you explain pipelines without any confusion. So know CI/CD concepts, and as well the basics of Docker, because in the modern software engineering world now, most software applications are being run with containers, and Docker is widely used. So you need to learn what a container is. You need to learn what a container is because most DevOps engineers are going to use the container. So at least like simple how you could run a simple Docker image locally. And most of this you can find it on Docker's documentation. And as well, you need to get familiar with certain cloud terms, like because most DevOps team work with cloud providers like AWS, Azure, GCP. I'm not saying you should master them, but at least you know the basics. Like pick up AWS, for example, now. Try to know the basics of maybe S3, IAM, EC2, Lambda. Just get familiar with it. No one is telling you to set it up. You just need to understand the concepts behind this. You need to familiarize yourself with the certain key terms of these cloud words, these cloud jargons. What are these cloud jargons? So that you could explain it to someone else that's trying to understand it as well. And again, yeah, automation is really important because that's the whole point of DevOps. And I'm not saying you should go and learn how to write Python, but knowing how scripting works and how automation works is going to save you a whole lot of stress. So I would say the key things you should know, don't learn everything at once. Try to start with the basics. You learn your version control, you pick up your CI/CD concepts, you learn what Docker is, how to set up how to run a Docker image locally. get familiarized with certain terms. I think, yeah, AWS is very important, is quite popular. So I would advise to go that part. I'm not saying you should neglect the other ones if you want to be diversified, but you need to understand what these basic cloud terminologies are. And then as well, just how automation works. So with all this, I mean, and as you're learning, always try to write about it, share it publicly. It adds to your portfolio. So whenever you're trying to apply for a technical writing role in the DevOps space, you already have a whole lot of documentations that you've written about these particular terms and terminologies. So that would be my piece of advice to anyone that wants to
get into this space.
as a technical writer that wants to go into the DevOps space.
Thank you so much for that. Both of our speakers have emphasized the fact that you have to learn the basics, you have to learn the concepts before you actually move on to learning the tools. So I think that shows how important, understanding the concepts and the basics is to having a successful career as a technical writer or a DevOps engineer in this space. So I have a final question. And it actually goes to both speakers. I think Jimmy can take this before Emmanuel. So the question I have is, what advice would you give to a technical writer who wants to specialize in DevOps or platform engineering documentation?
What advice? I always have a lot of advices. So for me, yeah, the one advice that stuck with me and I still carry heavy on my chest is try to focus on becoming a translator. Try to focus to becoming a bridge. I know I've mentioned the word bridge so many times on this call, but as a technical writer in the DevOps space, you are the bridge between the engineers and the end users. So try to focus on how you can translate these complex terms. Because trust me, yeah, DevOps can be quite complex at times. So try to focus on how you can translate these complex systems into a way that anyone can read and understand it. Because trust me, DevOps can feel intimidating. But as a technical writer, you don't have to be an expert in everything to add value. So one thing I would suggest is have a curious mind. Try to be curious. So instead of chasing every new tool, try to focus on how engineers actually work, how this concept actually work, because that's the whole point of DevOps, is the concept. So try to get curious about how this concept works, the concept of pipelines, the concept of deployment, the concept of monitoring, troubleshooting, because that is basically the concept of DevOps. So once you understand these workflows, then you can be able to document it no matter the tool. So because the tool is just maybe an added, so once you understand the concept, you'll be able to document it no matter the tool. And we know we are in a tech world and tools are changing. So no matter what, the concepts still remain, tools will change. And as well, learn the lingo. There are so many terms, like I mentioned in my previous question, in my previous answer, CI/CD terms, this container terms, all these things, just learn the lingos. And try to also do audience analysis here. Whenever you're trying to write a new document, try to always write for multiple audiences. Try to understand, like in our audit framework, in our class, where you need to actually understand the process of writing a document. You need to actually do an audience analysis to understand who you're writing for. And be best friends with the engineers. Stay close to them. Ask questions. You have a curious mind. As a technical writer, you should be curious. Oh, how does this work? Try and stay in their meetings sometimes. Like when you stay on the meetings with DevOps engineers, you'll be able to hear all these terms. You'll be like, oh, CI/CD, what does this mean? Oh, Kubernetes, what does this mean? Like you just have that curious mind. And when you're friends with the engineers, like when you stay close to them, how they work, you'll be able to understand and be able to translate all these complex terms into simple and clear languages. So that would be my advice. Have a curious mind. Don't feel intimidated. Stay close to your engineers and do audience analysis every time. So those are the things that have actually helped me, and those are the things that have stuck with me over time, and it has really helped. So I believe that's one takeaway for me.
Thank you so much, Jimmy. I think Emmanuel, we also need your advice. What advice would you give to a technical writer who wants to specialize in DevOps or platform engineering documentation?
Yeah, I'm just going to piggyback off what Jimmy already mentioned. Nothing is going to beat being curious, because in the DevOps space, if you're someone that likes to stay in your comfort zone, you don't want to come out of your comfort zone, nah, it's not going to work. So you're definitely going to need to ask questions. There are concepts you will hear about, there are terms you will hear that will bust your head, that will seem very, very intimidating, and you will need an engineer to break it down for you. And another thing I would advise, even you don't necessarily need to be a master in most of all these DevOps concepts, like maybe Kubernetes, CI/CD pipelines, or whatever. But I will still advise to build something as simple as you could just like deploy an Hello World application, an Hello World front end, Hello World backend, maybe deploy onto AWS, create a CI/CD pipeline that will deploy your code from your GitHub repo, and you can basically do that for free. Just like use GitHub Actions, create a role for your GitHub Actions pipeline, deploy into an EC2 instance within the free trial. Is going to be very, very basic, and just see how it's communicating over the internet. For some of you that may have domains, you may like just assign an A record to it so you can see what you're doing over like with your own domain, that kind of thing. I mentioned the Cloud Resume project. That Cloud Resume challenge, rather, that challenge can help you deploy serverless. That's one another thing that is even being pushed by most organizations right now. Serverless, you can deploy a serverless application for free onto the cloud provider of your choice. Most of them already have free tiers. So doing will actually make you have empathy for us to see that what we are doing is can be very, very intimidating at times. So when you actually have when you're able to do things yourself, you're able to like implement it yourself, you see the whole process that goes into deploying something as simple as an hello world application, then you'll be able to appreciate the work and document it even better. So I think that's going to be very, very helpful. Be curious and at least try to build something as
Yeah.
small as it is. I'm sure it will be very, very helpful.
Thank you so much, Jimmy. Thank you so much, Emmanuel. So we have about 5 minutes left. If you have any questions, you can raise your hand, we'll call on you, you can drop it in the chat. In the meantime, as a bit of summary, so our speakers have, emphasized how important technical content, especially documentation, is. Jimmy spoke about ensuring that you write to cater to different audiences, writing for clarity, ensuring that your end users can actually use the product or the documentation that you've written. Emmanuel gave an instance of how he worked with the documentation that helped him solve a problem. He also gave an instance of a situation where a documentation could have helped him solve a problem quicker if it existed. They also give tools that you can learn if you're looking to get into either of these spaces. They mentioned that you have to learn the basics, you have to, build something no matter how little it is. They also mentioned that you need to have a curious mind. You need to work with the engineers. You need to be a translator, be a bridge between both worlds. They also mentioned, what was it like that? Okay, that's kept to my mind. But yeah, the fact is that they mentioned a lot of valuable stuff they've given from their wealth of experience, everyday experiences working in this space, and you have it to take from. So thank you so much for giving us your time, and thank you to everyone here, for giving us your time and coming to learn from us as well. So if you have any questions, like I said, you can raise your hand, you can drop it in the chat so that we can wrap things up on time. I'm just going to wait for a few minutes to see if anyone has any questions. Okay, Fisayo, yes, you can unmute yourself and speak.
Hi, good evening, Jimmy and Emmanuel. Thank you guys very much for this session, and you too, Claribert. I have four questions though. I don't know. I hope they're able to answer it so that we can also wrap up on time. My first question is, so I get what you say about DevOps and how it's important in like the tech ecosystem. I just want to know if you would consider it a transferable skill to industries other than the tech industry. I mean, there are other industries in Nigeria. I'm not talking of like just internationally. I'm trying to think of like for the country. Besides tech, there are other industries that we have here. So would you say that it is a transferable skill to like industries like oil and gas, banking, should I distinct we even have? Basically, Sha, that's my first question. The second one is, would you say there was involving like how on a scale of 1 to 10, how much code would you write as like, or have you written, or do you write in like a day to day as a as a DevOps engineer? And also, the third question is, what would you say is like the future of like DevOps in the context of like AI? Would you say that, because I'm not in the DevOps space, so would you say like the DevOps industry is becoming more and more dependent on AI? What does that look like? What would you say DevOps would look like in like 5 years from now in the context of AI, so that those who are getting in would like know what people who are in industry, like what their opinion is regarding it? I think it also help for those who are interested in getting it, just to like frame their learning process and like how to move with it. And then number four is, do you know any like open source DevOps like repositories that people who are interested in starting can contribute to? Yeah, that's basically it. I don't know if I have to like repeat or you guys got that. I can't do. I wrote it down, so I didn't forget it.
Yeah, thank you for your
Uh,
questions, and for bringing your curious mind, like the speakers spoke about. So I just wanted to confirm: are your questions directed to both speakers? Are you directing it to
yeah,
one
both of them.
person?
No, both of them. Anybody can
Okay.
answer. Yeah, I would like to hear from both of them actually, but like anybody can answer.
Okay. Maybe a speaker can take two questions, the other speaker can take the other two. I don't know who wants to go first.
Okay, think I can start with the open source. Mm, so I think I can start with the open source. Like, yeah. So when it comes to open source repositories that people can contribute to, when you're interested in DevOps, like I said, contributing to open source is one good way of boosting your portfolio. Well, mm, so there are a few good places to start here. A few good places to start. Kubernetes, yeah, they have a large community. They have a large community, and even though the community is large, you might not find open issues. You might not find open issues. So, well, if you target this bigger companies like, okay, let's say Kubernetes, Docker, or Terraform, you might not find issues for you to what's that word, for you to contribute to. So there are smaller projects on GitHub. There are small communities on GitHub. I think I'm going to, on the Slack channel, I'm going to drop some communities there, some like DevOps communities there that are like growing, and they are fast paced. Some of these companies are growing at fast pace where you could make contributions to, that your impact are going to be very significant and it's going to be worth it on the long run. So I'm going to drop those information on the Slack channel for people. It's going to be on the general channel so that for people that are here that are not part of the bootcamp session as well can pick a thing or two from it. Uh, Concerning the opinion of DevOps with AI, I know that question is very valid. Right now, that question is very valid because I mean, no one wants to go into a field where in 5 years' time, AI has taken your job. I know everyone is scared that AI is taking your job, but I still keep saying this, that AI is just there to assist you. So right now, sorry, yeah. So right now, the opinion about it is still quite mixed here, but it's optimistic, like based on research and the prediction. I know I'm still optimistic about it because I know people would worry that AI would replace engineers, but the reality, and I keep saying, is that AI, the reason of AI, like one of the reasons of AI is to actually assist. So as a DevOps engineer, one of the good thing about AI is just to assist you. It's to assist your DevOps workflow, not to fully automate it. It's like when automation came in, when the whole idea of automation came in, people were worried about on-premises. People were worried about the idea of, will it create more opportunities? But people still found a way. People still found a way to adapt. And right now we're in the adaptation phase of AI in every industry. When AI came out, people were worried that, oh, it's going to take all of our jobs. But right now, this is like the third year or the fourth year of AI, and everyone is still adapting to it, and AI products are always going to come out. And that's the whole point of technology. Technology is meant to evolve and get better and reduce stress. So the point of using AI in DevOps space is just, it is only going to assist you to improve your speed and help you catch issues faster. So maybe you've integrated an AI into your workflow. I mean, there are now tools now that you can, as a technical writer that is built on an existing AI that, if integrated into your workflow, is going to help you spot changes, spot errors, spot ways you can improve your documentation. I think one of the sessions we have later this week is about docs as tests, integrating a tool that would actually catch these errors. So just think about it from the point of making life easier with AI and DevOps is only going to reduce the workload and improve speed and help catch issues faster. That is my prediction, and that's what like the industry experts are saying. Everything can change in 5 years' time, 6 years' time, 7 years' time. But right now, the future is optimistic about the DevOps space, even regardless of whatever AI that's coming in. So I would say right now, AI is already making that impact. AI is already making that impact. And I think in 5 years' time, AI is going to take away all of this, some of these things that we do repetitive, but it is only going to assist and is not going to take the job. It's going to be all about the point of collaboration, because the reliability, we still need human to make sure that AI is not hallucinating. So I think Emmanuel can take the one about the day-to-day as a DevOps engineer.
Thank you, Jimmy.
Okay. My own point of view, because these are just my point of view. One, the first question I think you asked about is AI, is DevOps a
Transferable
transferable skill?
skills.
Is DevOps a transferable skills to industries like oil and gas, banking? Absolutely. So DevOps is not just tied to one industry, because whether it is oil and gas, banking, healthcare, or tech, every industry now relies on software systems. That's the truth. So, and these software systems, they need to be built, tested, deployed, and maintained. So now this brings idea the principle of automation, CI/CD, collaboration. It applies in these industries. The only difference I would say is the domain knowledge. For example, now in the banking industry, you would deal with compliance or dealing with people's money, compliance and security. While in oil and gas, you'll be thinking about the data pipelines for sensors, because so it is all about, every industry have its own specifications. And DevOps, every industry all run on software systems. And every software systems, is tied to the concept of DevOps. So the concept of the DevOps mindset and the tool set are very transferable to every industry. I don't know if that's the direction of the question you were taking it to when you were talking about the skill, or what direction were you talking about?
No, yeah, that's what I meant. I was actually going for like, maybe if you knew like, oh, this like specific, because I don't know if, I mean, I'm not in DevOps space, so I don't know if it's like every aspect of like DevOps that is transferable, or it's just like, oh, the aspect of automation, maybe like infrastructure as code is not like transferable, like just basically those. That's what I mean. But you answered the question just fine either ways.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that Emmanuel could like share his point of view because of this time.
Yeah,
Okay.
so in terms of that, I think the skills are totally transferable. And as Jimmy mentioned, those industries, almost every industry right now, there are systems that are running to make their processes quite seamless. And for those systems to be scalable, for them to even deploy those systems in the first place, there has to be a process. So, like I mentioned earlier, that DevOps is the bridge between development and operations. So, DevOps is definitely going to be there. Even for industries that may not be using cloud providers, you can still make use of DevOps concepts. Infrastructure as code. There are Ansible. You can use Ansible for configuring your bare metal servers. So IAC still applies. So in terms of, so probably at the moment, you may not just have the particular skill that fits with a different domain. Like I'm mentioning Ansible now. Maybe you're coming from a cloud agnostic environment. You're used to AWS, you're used to Azure, you're used to GCP. So then you're not going to bare metal where they are doing everything on prem. So you don't necessarily Terraform may not or will not be applicable in that kind of situation. So that's when you now have to use runbooks or Ansible for configuration and all of that. So that's what I was saying. DevOps is not a role per se. It's kind of is a concept, is a culture. So that's where that culture still applies in that same scenario. You are using different tools. That's why I mentioned earlier you should focus on learning concepts because the tools are a lot for different use cases. So yeah, once you get the concepts, that skill, the knowledge of the concepts, totally transferable within across different industries. So I think that's sort of answers your question.
I think
Yeah,
she had one more.
yeah, I did have.
The
Okay,
Yeah, I
what's the
think the
last?
final question is on the amount of code that a DevOps engineer has to write on a day-to-day basis.
Like on a scale of 1 to 10.
So I think that's dependent. Somebody like me, I like it's dependent on the environment you are in. Like if you are in my team, you write code. You write code on a scale of 10 because everything is infrastructure as code. I don't do ClickUp. So it's kind of dependent on the environment you are in. So you should familiarize yourself with scripting and all that. Maybe Python, Go, whatever. It's all dependent on the environment you're in. Some environments they do ClickUps. Some people don't even have pipelines. So they can just tell you to just push to their Azure repo on prem, then their sysadmin or the operation persons will just do some workaround and just deploy to the bare metal server. So it's all really dependent on on the environment you are in. So if you're let me not be biased and say a forward-thinking environment, you are most likely going to write code on a scale of seven. Let me just say 7 out of 10. 7 out of 10. But again, it's all dependent on the environment you are in.
Okay. Do you want to
And
like give
it's
us
very, very
updates
up.
on the environment that does not write codes, so that so that we can focus?
Oh my goodness.
I don't have that kind of update yet.
Okay. But I think since you said you write code, like what would you say is the like predominant programming language? You said Python, right?
Yeah, for scripting, Python, and I think Go is gaining traction now. Go is kind of in some places just pushing Python away. For infrastructure as code, Terraform for sure, and Shell, or sorry, Bash rather. But if you're using Windows, but I doubt you find anywhere that they are running their maybe legacy systems like banks, so you can learn PowerShell. But yeah, Bash, Python, Go for scripting. Maybe Groovy if you're going to be doing QA testing, load testing, and all of that. But yeah, those are Python and Go actually for scripting. Those are the most common. Yeah.
All right then. Thank
And
you
it's
very
easy
much.
to learn. Don't be overwhelmed by it. So far, you have an interest in it. Trust me, it's quite it'll be a breeze while you're learning.
Stunning. I'll have to find out. Thank you very much, Jimmy and Emmanuel. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you as well for answering the questions. Thank you, Fusayo, for coming with your questions. In case you missed it, Omotola also dropped a link to some open source projects that you can check out for technical writing and for DevOps. Maybe I can also send it to Jimmy as well, so he can add it to the one that he wants to send to the Slack channel. But yeah, we've come to the end of today's program. Thank you to everybody for joining, for sticking with us to the end. Thank you to our speakers for, like I said earlier, joining us and coming to share from your wealth of knowledge and experience. I also learned a lot. Didn't used to have a lot of knowledge or experience about DevOps, DevSecOps, and I feel like I do to a good extent now. And also as a technical writer, some of the things I learned from you guys, I've just sort of learned, unlearned, and relearned some of the things I already know. So thank you so much for that. So yeah, we've come to the end of today's session. Thank you once more for joining, and I hope you all have a lovely rest of your day. Bye, guys.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Thank you.